Chapter 3. The name I carry, the ship sailed away from the stranded shell village, as if tearing a piece of Kael's soul. His black hair and brown eyes leaving him bleeding on the sand where Torin, with her brown hair and green eyes, remained a dark and solitary silhouette against the orange sunset. Kael leaned on the railing, his knuckles white from gripping the rough wood. The tears he'd stubbornly held back finally broke, silent and hot, mixing with the sea spray. Every meter of water between him and the shore was a cut. He had abandoned his brother, left him to the darkness, the wharf, the brutal survival. Then a heavy hand landed on his shoulder. It was Captain Lorn, his face carved from granite under a faded captain's hat. "Crying is good," the man said, his deep voice cutting through the sound of the waves. "Cleanses the soul. But look well." He jerked his chin toward the shore, where Torin's silhouette was still visible, now small as a coal ember on the beach. He stayed. "You went. It wasn't luck, boy. It was a path. Your friends stayed in the harbor. You're going out into the world. And the world demands men, not weeping boys." Kael turned, his red eyes fixed on the captain. "Grow, learn, become a mage. The sea obeys, and kings listen to. Only then will you be able to reach out and pull him from the sand." The words weren't comfort. They were a mission. Sharp blade that sliced through Kael's self-pity and laid bare a cold, hard determination. He wiped his face with his sleeve, raised his chin, and nodded once. There were no more tears. "Good," said Lorn. "Now get below. You leave the smell of fish behind. From now on, you smell of ink, parchment, and power." The safe span school wasn't a school. It was a miracle of engineering and will. When Lorn's ship rounded the final bend of the roaring river, Kael stood frozen at the bow, mouth agape. A colossal bridge made of gray stone and black iron beams spanned the furious river. It wasn't thin and elegant. It was massive, fortified, a horizontal fortress. Towers and turrets sprouted from its sides like stone mushrooms. Windows lined its walls. Smoke rose from chimneys. And upon it, between the two enormous gate towers, a pulsing marketplace sprawled with tense wagons and the constant buzz of commerce. The bridge itself was the school, the road, the toll station, and the symbol. 500 feet of wild river, an old sailor beside him said, spitting over the side. Built by dwarves and humans 200 years ago. Below, classrooms. In the middle, the market. Above, labs and libraries. And the whole thing sways a little when the wind blows strong. "Welcome to the safe span, kid." Kael felt a chill down his spine that wasn't from the wind. It was reverential. Awe. His new life began with a hot batha, first in years, and a simple apprentice's tunic. He was presented to the headmaster, Master Balder Pontifex, a dwarf whose legs were formed of living stone and whose gaze seemed to weigh a person's soul in seconds. "Kael, is it?" Balder grunted, examining Lorn's letter. "Of the stranded, it says here." "Good. You are a number, an investment. Here you will learn 3 things. Water magic, because the river and the sea don't forgive fools. Commerce, because the world revolves around gold. And how not to die, because knowledge is useless in a corpse." "Understood?" "Good. And this Torin at the end of your name?" "Hey." Kael straightened his back. "It's my family name, Master." Balder raised a thick eyebrow. "Not a surname from around here?" The dwarf watched him for a long moment, then nodded, a near smile touching his lips hidden by his beard. "Good. A name with weight is better than an empty name. Go. Master Alistair Deepwater awaits you in the wet lab." Kael's education was a whirlwind. He, who could barely trace his own name, was plunged into books of runes, treatises on aquatic alchemy, maps of sea currents, and mercantile negotiation manuals. The magic classes were what set his heart alight. Water magic, he discovered, wasn't just about making water jets. It was about pressure, flow, states of matter, dissolution, healing, purification, and raw power. It was about feeling the moisture in the air, the current in the river, the tide in one's own veins. His talent was innate and deep, fueled by the constant memory of the sea, of the stranded village of shells, and the unspoken promise to Torin. He quickly stood out. While other apprentices struggled to form a stable water globe, Kael was already creating controlled waterfalls and defensive whirlpools. His teacher, Alistair, a turquoise-scaled lizard man, dubbed his gift tide sense, an almost intuitive connection to bodies of water and their flows. But the school wasn't just magic. There were practical trials in the lower courtyard, where apprentices dueled under instructor supervision. Kael was never a strength fighter, he was a strategist. He used water jets to unbalance, walls of mist to blind, instant ice armor to block blows. He learned to fight with Lyra, a quick, astute human whose air magic was his perfect antithesis. He learned about endurance from Dorin, a dwarven apprentice who preferred hammers and stone shields to spells. And he learned stealth from Phelan, the feline semi-human instructor who seemed to slip between shadows. In commerce classes, he became a sharp negotiator. He learned to read contracts, appraise goods, sense the lie in a merchant's tone. He worked the bridge toll, dealing with surly carters and greedy merchants. He learned that every coin had a weight, and every weight carried a story. The years passed. Scrawny wharf boy became a young man of medium stature, but solid presence. His brown eyes, once full of fear, were now calm and observant, reflecting the depth he studied. He never allowed himself to be called just Kael. It was always Kael Stranded Torin. The name was his banner, his anchor, his promise. At 20, he was ready to graduate. He wasn't first in his class, but he was among the three of the current, the best hydromancers of his generation. Graduation wouldn't be a simple speech. It would be a graduation mission, a rite of passage for the most promising graduates. In the great audience hall of the North Tower, Master Balder assembled 15 graduates. Among them, the ones closest to Kael: Lyra Windstring, his rival and friend, Air Mage; Dorin, Ironarm, the resilient dwarf; Ilara Seaspray, no relation to the traitor, a half-elf with an affinity for mists and aquatic illusions; Grim Frostblood, a practical and brutal human, specialist in offensive ice magic; Mira Weavecurrent, a young woman who commanded water as an extension of her dance. "Your final test," Balder announced, pointing to a map on the table. "The Whispering Forges of Coldmere, a dwarven crystal mine, taken by corrupted fire elementals. A newly classified rank for dungeon." A murmur ran through the room. Rank 4 was serious, but they were 15. 15 water and ice mages trained of near silver level if they were adventurers. It's a heavy challenge, but plausible. The objective, Balder continued, is to collect pelts from forge profane firewolves. Their hide, if magically chilled at the moment of death, becomes a high-value, fire-resistant material. 6 pelts. It proves your control, your teamwork, and your market value. Bring them back, and your diplomas will be sealed with more than ink. They'll be sealed with merit. Kael exchanged a look with Lyra and Dorin. It was dangerous, but it was also his doorway into the real world. A world where he could finally accumulate resources, influence, and perhaps find a way back to the stranded village of shells. The descent into the Whispering Forges was, initially, a display of coordinated force. The 15 mages formed a well-oiled machine. Grim and other ice specialists created barriers and freezing lances. Ilara and Mira generated dense fogs that smothered the lesser flames. Kael, Lyra, and Dorin formed the offensive core. Kael destabilized elementals with pressurized water jets that hissed on contact. Lyra disoriented them with cutting wind gusts, and Dorin, encased in thick ice armor, acted as a bastion, crushing already weakened creatures. They advanced through dark, steaming tunnels, collecting pelts with clinical efficiency. Confidence grew. They were academics, yes, but dangerously competent ones. That's when the sounds came. First, howls not of the bestial fire elementals, but of human and dwarven pain and despair. Then, the sound of metal on stone, of muffled screams, of the terrible crack of bones breaking under intense heat. Kael raised a hand, and the group stopped. They exchanged worried looks. Another group was down there, and they were in trouble. "Detour is safer," Grim whispered, pragmatic. "They're adventurers," said Lyra, her face tense. "Could be guild." Kael didn't hesitate. "We can help. We're 15. It's what we're trained to. Do control fire." Without waiting for total consensus, he ran toward the sounds, his companions following. Some reluctant, others determined. The tunnel opened into a vast infernal chamber. The air shimmered with heat, smelled of burned flesh and defeat. What Kael saw was a nightmare tableau. A group of adventurers was being torn apart. A dwarf lay in charred pieces. Elven ashes were scattered by a hot wind. A human summoner tried in vain to raise a water shield that evaporated instantly before being struck down by a colossal creature, living Ember Alpha, surrounded by a pack of howling firewolves. At the center of the massacre, a last adventurer, a swordsman, fell with a horrific blow to his flank. And before him, kneeling, holding a bow, was a lean, scarred figure, shoulders slumped under the weight of absolute loss. There was no time for strategy. The Alpha was turning toward the kneeling man, its lava jaws ready for the final strike. "Focus on the Alpha," Kael shouted, his voice echoing in the chamber with an authority he didn't know he had. Glacier Barrage Pattern 3. It was as if an orchestra of aquatic destruction sprang into action. 15 wands and gestures rose in unison. The air, once dry and searing, filled with a sudden violent cold. The Alpha barely had time to roar before a bolt of blue-white energy, colder than an iceberg's heart, shot from Kael's hands and struck it in the neck. At the same time, a translucent dome of ice, studded with glowing runes, rose around the kneeling man, raised by the combined effort of Alara and Mira. The rest of the group fired ice lances, supercooled water jets, and icy winds at the lesser wolves, which howled and recoiled from the sudden elemental shift. The Alpha, wounded and confused, diverted its attack. Kael didn't stop. Grim Doran containment. Lyra, heat dispersal. The rest, clear the wolves. He advanced, his feet treading on still warm ashes. His attention wasn't on the battle his comrades now dominated with overwhelming force. It was on the man inside the ice dome. The man who, now weak and dazed, was collapsing to the floor. Kael ran to the barrier. The gesture, a portal opened in the ice. He entered, kneeling beside the wounded adventurer. The man was on his back, breathing with difficulty, his face covered in soot and blood. But the eyes. Green eyes, devoid of hope, but familiar in a way that pierced 8 years of distance, as if it were a second. Kael placed his hands over the terrible wound in the man's flank. His hands glowed with a soft blue light, pure healing water emanating from his fingers, beginning to staunch the burn, to cool the dead flesh. The wounded man blinked, trying to focus. His vague gaze found Kael's face. And then, from his cracked lips, came a breath, a sound almost inaudible over the chaos of the battle continuing around the dome. A name Kael had carried in his own name for a decade. A name that was a cry of pain, of surprise, of absolute disbelief. Kael. The voice was unrecognizable from suffering in the years, but the look. The look was the same as the boy who had shared a stolen fish on the wharf's edge. Kael's world stopped. The sound of battle vanished. It's the cold of the ice, the heat of the inferno around. It all dissolved. There was only the battered face before him, the green eyes seeking his, and the echo of that single word. He cradled the man's face, his mage's hands now trembling not from exhaustion, but from an overwhelming emotion. "Torin," he whispered, and the word was a confession, a lament, an oath fulfilled and broken at the same time. "My brother." End of part 3. Thank you for getting this far. Subscribe to the channel and receive more videos like this.